トビデオ
When you do cartoons long enough, chances are you'll soon be making a cartoon about making a cartoon. Write what you know applies to every medium, and that includes animation. Ever since the medium was codified nearly a century ago, animators have longed to showcase the everyday vicissitudes of their chosen craft. They can be fascinating, humorous looks at what goes into making a cartoon, or they can shine a light on the hardships and troubles that go hand in hand with the industry. Or they could just be a simple excuse for the writers and animators to just get meta on your ass.
Okay, then Rocco, Filbert, and the Rhino guy come into the...
And given that it's a country that makes the most animated content compared to others, animation about animation is certainly not a foreign concept in Japan. Sometimes there'll be impassioned treatises about the inherent beauty of animation, how it's both an incredible parlor trick and a labor of love created by the most passionate of souls in order to weave visually stunning narratives that capture the minds and hearts of many. Other times there'll be cynical examinations on the brutality of the anime industry as a whole, how animators are constantly being pushed to the brink, mentally and physically, by the producers with their get the job done now mentality, and how overworked and undervalued they are because they are seen as expendable and replaceable. But then there's that anime that tries to find a middle ground in order to paint a more realistic picture. Like, yeah, sure, the industry is exploitative and fraught with stressful deadlines, sleepless all-nighters, and idiots not doing what you tell them to do, resulting in more of the former. But at the end of the day, you are still an important member of a team that creates works of art, and that requires a level of love and dedication to the craft you can't just find anywhere. And it's through anime like this that we, the audience, can get the best picture of what it's like to be a part of the process of making anime. Even if said anime tends to be less educational and more, well, screwy. Mikiko Oguro, fresh out of animation school, is excited about starting her new job at the local animation studio, Studio Petite. When she arrives at her new workplace, the producer wastes no time in hanging the nickname Kuromi on her, giving her the grand tour of the studio, appointing her to the production manager position, and immediately keeling over. And so begins Animation Runner Kuromi. Released in 2001 with a sequel released in 2004, Animation Runner Kuromi might be one of the most inside baseball anime of its time. It's a nutty parody of both the animation profession and the anime industry as a whole. On one hand, it's got plenty of broad slapstick that anyone could laugh at, but on the other, it's chock full of specific references and jokes that only appear to be made for people who either work in the field of animation or at least have a knowledge of the field of animation. Anime like this was designed for nerds like me. If you ever wanted to get a point of view from Japanese animators about what it's like to work in the anime industry, Animation Runner Kuromi is probably the anime that best presents that point of view. It's an anime that has its tongue placed firmly in its cheek regarding the profession, never failing to make jokes at the expense of the production higher-ups, the occupational pitfalls, and even the animators themselves. But when you look past all the jokes about high stress and low pay, you can see that there is a lot of genuine affection for the animation medium. You almost get the feeling that maybe all those long hours slaving away at the drawing board are worth it when you can finally see the fruits of your labors appear on screen. And of course we all know that isn't entirely true. Please treat your animators better, Japan. But harsh realities aside, Animation Runner Kuromi does an excellent job of parodying the anime industry while also acknowledging the work of those making the anime. And I think one of the main people to credit for this approach would be the OVA's director, Akitaro Daichi. For a brief period in the late 90s, early 2000s, Akitaro Daichi was an anime director who was very much in demand by the studios. Getting his start as a storyboarder in the early 90s, he was able to rise very quickly to the ranks of director, arguably leading to his peak in which he directed 3 critically acclaimed anime in quick succession with Now and Then Here and There, Tsukekage Ran, and his most recognizable work, Fruit Baskets. Daichi's acclaim as a director comes mostly from his skills as a storyboarder. This has allowed him to have an almost unparalleled knack for blocking. Just pick out any scene from an anime he has storyboarded, and you'll notice little things like shot compositions and character movements being the reason why a comedic scene can be so funny, or a tragic scene can be so gut-wrenching. And given that he went from directing an emotionally flaying war story to directing a lighthearted samurai romp within a year of each other without trouble, it really shows that Daichi is a director with a lot of adaptability. So his flexibility, combined with his adept knowledge of how to board scenes that best fit the story, surely would make him the perfect fit in directing not just Animation Runner Kuromi, but practically any anime. Certain allegations notwithstanding, of course. Now, to go into more specifics as to why Akitaru Daichi was the correct choice to direct this series, look no further than to how he creates an atmosphere. In any other anime, this style of fast-paced, bouncing-off-the-wall style of animation could just be seen coming with the territory of the anime being a screwball comedy. But in Animation Runner Kuromi, the reason why the comedy in it is so frantic is because the anime takes place in an anime studio that is struggling to meet a deadline. Out of all the anime about making anime I've seen so far in my life, which is relatively few, Animation Runner Kuromi really comes the closest in capturing the stressful last-minute sprint of any project. There's this sense of controlled chaos in everything from how the scenes are laid out to how the characters move. In character movement, special mention goes to Kuromi herself. We'll go into more detail when we talk about the plot, but for now just know that the animators really capture the feeling of new meat being thrown in the grinder on her first day. One specific scene of note is when she has to drive down to the beach and back to pick up the last cuts to be shipped overseas, and it beautifully captures Kuromi's sheer panic along with being a killer Lupin III reference. But it's in the second OVA where the character animation really gets kicked up a couple of notches. The drawings in the sequel are allowed to have a lot more flexibility when it comes to style because they can switch styles to best suit the gag, whether they are for clever references or just some good old-fashioned ridiculousness. This also extends to the character animation, which is far sprightlier, believe it or not, and is also willing to bend the art style for comedic purposes, such as this scene where Kuromi's mentor, anime director Hamako, is trying to deal with the stress of directing 3 anime at the same time, on top of trying to quit smoking. Speaking of character movements, let's talk character designs, shall we? The character designs were designed by Hajime Watanabe. Watanabe's forte as a character designer is giving characters deceptively simple cartoonish designs that are nevertheless recognizable and relatable. We can see this in the 1995 anime adaptation of Kodacha, where he adapted Miho Obana's designs masterfully from manga to anime. But while Kodacha was still conforming to shoujo design tropes for the most part, Kuromi takes the simple symmetrical designs of Kodacha and exaggerates them. Daichi really wanted to showcase the eccentric, exaggerated personalities of the typical animation staffer he deals with on a daily basis. To do this, he and Watanabe turned those personalities into cartoon characters with exaggerated features, but they did so without sacrificing the simple human feel to them, and it makes you think that these wacky characters are based on actual human beings because they're so specific looking. Also, while we're still thinking about Kodacha, hi, small mascot that gives loud commentary on the events currently unfolding.
Evening! Morning! Animators morning! It's 10 o'clock now!
Now, if you'll permit me to talk about something only I care about, let me take some time to talk about the dub for a bit. It's a pretty well done one for this type of anime, and I'm not just saying that because it's got my girl Lisa in the titular role.
Right, I'll go get the keys. Excuse me, but where am I going?
The direction for Anime Kuromi's dub is a good case study of how to dub an anime of this tone. Arlen Tarlovsky, the voice director for the English dub, had his actors act out their lines in a very loose, almost improvisational style of acting. The result is voice acting that fits the screwball tone of the anime, while also making you feel for the characters by how relatable they sound. I mean, yes, it's cartoony and over-exaggerated, but there's a hint of naturalism in the dialogue that makes it feel like you've come across people like this IRL. Like, we definitely know someone who has been in the situation like Hiromi's, plucky, perky, yet trying not to come apart at the seams through all the stress.
My stomach. I'm burning a hole in my stomach. I quit.
We've also certainly come across a Hamiko once in our lives, a role that feels real thanks to Suzanne Savoy's performance that perfectly balances world-weary experience with the kindly warmth of a helpful mentor.
You don't need to apologize. That was my fault. I should have told you to warn them about him.
Good girl.
And Lord, have we come across people that sound like the otaku Haruyu, a role done by none other than Yamayuki himself, Dan Green.
Here, you see? I'm working on it.
Just 2 cuts?
It's much better than yesterday.
But this dub is not perfect. Oh no. While the cartoony voices certainly fit animation runner Kuromi, sometimes they can get a little too cartoony, so much so that they can and will take you out of it. The most egregious example being Rachel Lillis's performance as the gloomy Horiguchi, who sounds like she just came straight out of Soviet Russia.
It is maybe as you know, the characters, they're not designed so good. Hey there, Shihanmatsu! Oh, I just love to pieces what you said about me. A super effort, comrade.
Please, go away.
But enough about things only I care about. What about the things that make Animation Runner Kuromi so special beyond just being a wacky workplace comedy in the anime industry? The whole plot of the first OVA centers around Kuromi being given her first task as a production manager, and how it's already a nightmare and a half. The job of a production manager is to oversee the budget and schedule of an anime and make sure everything gets done on time and on budgets. This is usually done through acting as the all-encompassing liaison between every member of the production crew and seeing that everyone finishes their work on time and gets it to the right people. And you could imagine how stressful a position of that magnitude can be when it's your first job and you're immediately put on an anime that's way behind schedule, the animators aren't turning in enough of their cuts, and the only animator that does turn in their required amount of cuts only does so because they draw extremely off-model. The whole thing is just this perfect storm of stressful situations that complements the fast-paced quirkiness of the anime. However, just because the stressfulness of the main conflict is mostly played for goofs, it doesn't automatically mean that the stress of the job isn't taking a mental toll on Kuromi. After 2 days of making zero progress with the schedule, Kuromi pins all the blame on herself and decides it would be best if she just quits. And her co-workers respond by saying, "Sure, feel free to quit."
Oh, is that so? You're quitting, huh?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm not waiting for you to find a replacement.
Fine, if that's what you gotta do, that's what you gotta do.
Right.
The anime recognizes that not everyone is cut out for this industry because it's rough work full of long hours and low pay, and that people who even make it to a position like director in this industry are the lucky ones. But when asked about what made her get involved in this industry in the first place, Kuromi responds that she was a fan of this Lupin-esque anime called Luemon III, and how it inspired her to want to be a part of an industry that creates such masterpieces.
He was so cool. So I thought someday that I wanted to create something like that. I suppose that was just my first mistake, and now here I am in the middle of this mess.
This is the best example of the warts and all approach to the animation industry that Animation Runner Kuromi takes. It recognizes that anime production is a hard, thankless occupation that not everyone else is cut out for. But it also says that a drive to create is what ultimately makes it all worthwhile. A nice, touching sentiment, if a somewhat overly idealist one. Seriously, Japan, treat your animators better. But that's not the whole thesis of the anime. Kuromi still has that problem with trying to get the cuts from the animators. How do we fix that? This leads us into the second and most important thesis of the first OVA. Communication is the key to success.
First, never tell them how much trouble they're causing. Never use terms like that. Bad karma. And don't ask them how many cuts they have or how many sheets they've done. And never, ever count the cuts in front of their faces. It's like a major insult.
It's not good enough. You have to do better. No help. I have it scheduled
Don't tell me.
Kuromi learns the hard way that animators, like any artists, are an eccentric bunch. And if you want to get any headway with them, you have to know how to communicate with them in the right way. Learn who they are and what they like. If one animator gets work done if she's ranting about her husband, just bring up her marriage while she's drawing. If another animator is an easily distracted otaku, get him out of his house where he's surrounded by his toys and back into the office. While this is all comedic, it's all there to show you that animators are human beings with wants and needs, and that sometimes they work more efficiently if they are given certain conditions to work under. But while it's all fun, lighthearted themes set to excellently shot animation, it all feels like this anime is missing something. Yes, they make the deadline and Kuromi realizes her place in the industry when she sees her name in the credits, but it all still feels like a more fun dive into the animation industry than an educational one. But maybe that's for the best, considering the industry has changed so drastically since 2001 and there's a lot of techniques we see on display here that aren't exactly relevant anymore. I mean, look, they're using a stopwatch to measure the timing for the animation. That's the main reason why that gag from Dexter's Lab makes even less sense now than it did then. So Animation Runner Kuromi is wacky, heartwarming fun, but it does feel like it's missing a piece that can truly complete it as a work. Luckily, that piece just so happens to be Animation Runner Kuromi 2.
You said 3 shows?
That's right, 3.
You mean 3?
That's right, 3 new TV series.
Just these guys for 3 TV series. Good one, boss! It was hard enough for us to finish just Time Journeys!
Kuromi,
Yes?
you can do it, can't you?
Not only does Animation Runner Kuromi improve on the original from a technical level, but also on a storytelling level. While the original deals with the stresses of what happens when you first enter an industry, the sequel decides to put Kuromi in a stressful situation that any creative type could relate to, being forced to choose between the passion for the arts and the demands of the business. And they do this by giving Kuromi and the rest of the staff an antagonist that any animator would fear.
A producer.
A producer is the guy that tells the artist what to do, and later makes all the changes, and then, when the cartoon's done, he takes all the credit.
Boy, Daichi and the crew really went above in designing Takashi Madaira, the producer. Everything from his look, to the way he shot, to the way he walks, just emphasizes how much this guy is a grade A scumbag, sitting right on top of his high horse with his head placed firmly up his own ass. In other words, he is the perfect personification of every grievance an animation staffer has had against the higher-ups. So the main conflict of the sequel is that Kuromi and the rest of the staff are being forced to work on 3 anime at the same time, and Takashi Madaira is brought aboard to help balance the projects. Unfortunately for all the animators involved, Takashi Madaira is more focused on meeting deadlines than actually delivering a quality product. He will do anything to ensure that the anime is delivered on time, whether it be bringing aboard animators that refuse to work within the studio culture, forcing animators to draw scenes from multiple anime with vastly different art styles, or just implementing some good old-fashioned crunch. And if you complain about how these measures will cheapen the quality of the product visually, he'll just insult you, remind you of his experience in the industry, and make thinly veiled threats about how you're replaceable.
Sure, have a good evening.
Huh? Oh.
But don't bother coming back, seeing as how you're both so easily replaced anyway.
I got a feeling this anime might get a bit too real for people who have ever worked in a creative industry. But in spite of all his jerk-ass behavior, Kuromi still has to admit that Takashi Madaira might have a point. The staff is already spread thin as it is, so maybe they could just suck it up and deal with it if it means doing their jobs and getting their work turned in on time. That is, until Takashi Madaira decides to completely remove Hamiko from her directing chair, all just because they don't have time for her to do touch-ups. And it's then that Kuromi is shown what the results of Takashi Madaira's decisions really are.
Louis Mon's face! What's wrong with his face? Was it always like this?
I worked on this one. And so did Shihan Matsu. And Takashi Madaira produced it. Skipping the direction is one of his old tricks.
We can't stand for this anymore.
Huh?
That kind of necessary evil is totally unnecessary!
Kuromi realizes that cutting corners and pushing the staff to their limits is no way to deliver a quality product. She then decides that the best thing to do is to get Hamako back, tell Takashi Madaira to shove it, and have everyone in the studio check and correct every keyframe to ensure a quality product. Not only do they get the anime done on time, they also get one over on Takashi Madaira by reminding him of the deadline and forcing him to help with their work. Oh, and if you think they're going to do the typical thing where he learns the error of his ways and the staff forgives him for how they were mistreated by him, don't worry about that. They slam that door in his face good and hard. In the end, this sequel is the element that completes Animation Runner Kuromi for me. While the original was a nice little romp through the stressful situations anime studio personnel have to deal with on the reg, this sequel gives a plot that I'm sure anyone in a creative industry, heck even in a non-creative industry, could relate to. We've all heard stories about that moment when some new profit-driven higher-up barges into the workplace, how they start implementing new regime changes that emphasizes profits and the get-it-done-now attitude, how they are a scumbag that only cares about the quantity over the quality, and how they place such a low value on their staff because they are constantly reminding them that they are replaceable. And considering how much that attitude has not only persisted in creative industries, but has also gotten measurably worse in recent years, it's honestly refreshing to see guys like this be put in their place and be told, no, we are not replaceable. We are workers who have talent and skill not everyone has. We have spent years honing our craft and passions to get where we are today, so we deserve to be respected and not treated like tools. So sit down, shut up, and let us do our damn jobs. This is what Animation Runner Kuromi is all about. Beyond all the gags and the well-drawn character animation, there is a statement that is saying to Japan that it should treat its animators better. While it may take a self-depreciating outlook towards the field of anime production, there's still some reverence for the craft, because they want people watching this to realize that anime is made by living, breathing human beings. In the beginning, Kuromi only gets results when she begins to start communicating with her animators like they are actual human beings with wants and needs, and not a stubborn lawnmower that refuses to turn over. And this theme carries over to the sequel with Kuromi on the other end, where another character sees both her and her entire staff as completely expendable tools, and she has to prove him wrong. Sure, this might seem like it's all preaching to the choir, but we live in a world where art and creativity are undervalued and taken for granted. It's seen as a skill that anyone can do, a profession deserving of low pay because how dare you get a job based on your passion? And along comes Animation Runner Kuromi, this lighthearted parody anime, to remind us that it doesn't have to be that way. The staff at the animation studio are no less valuable than any other occupation. Their labor has value and they are not expendable. And while they may be portrayed as cartoon characters, they are still human beings like you and me, and they deserve to be treated as such. And that to me is why Animation Runner Kuromi is such a hearty recommendation. It's a good reminder that behind all the colorful animated characters, there's still a human being working hard to craft that masterpiece for you.